There's a simple test you can do right now. Close your eyes, and whatever you do not think about a monkey. Go ahead, try. If you're like most people, a monkey just became the only thing in your mind. It's one of the most important observations in the history of human psychology, and it comes from a text called the Yoga Vasishta, written over 1,000 years ago. Welcome to the series on gods they buried. This one's dedicated to the destroyer of illusions, Bhairava. If you haven't already, please watch the 3-minute introduction video where I set the stage for this series. The video is linked in the description below. There is a story about a troubled king who approaches a sage seeking peace. The king confesses something unusual. He has tried everything to discipline his mind. Whenever anger arises, he forces himself to ignore it, and whenever desire surfaces, he pushes it away. When grief comes, he buries it under distraction, and yet, despite all his effort, he feels more restless than ever. The sage listens patiently. Then he gives the king that exact instruction. Close your eyes, imagine a monkey, and whatever you do, don't think about it. The king opens his eyes immediately, frustrated. Master, this is impossible. The moment you told me not to think of it, it became the only thing on my mind. The sage smiles. That, he says, is exactly what you have been doing with your emotions. The mind does not eliminate thoughts by force. When you attempt to suppress something completely, you give it more power, not less. So the harder the king had tried to banish anger or desire, the more those emotions grew quietly in the background. This observation sits at the center of Tantric philosophy, and it directly answers one of the deepest problems facing the modern Hindu, especially those of us who inherited a version of the tradition that was heavy on purity and less so on transformation. Most spiritual systems tell you to seek calm, avoid disturbance, purify the mind by removing what is dark. Tantra says the exact opposite. Desire, anger, fear, grief, these are not enemies of spiritual life. They are energies, raw forces within the psyche. When suppressed, they become destructive. When understood and directed, they become the very fuel of transformation. Don't get me wrong, this isn't permission to indulge, it is something far more demanding. You have to look directly at the thing you want most to run from, and that is exactly what Bhairava represents. In the beginning, when the universe was still young and silence flowed like a river through the vastness of space, there was only the endless ocean of being. From that ocean arose a lotus. Upon that lotus sat Brahma, the architect of worlds, the first thinker. He opened his eyes and saw nothing but emptiness. So he began to imagine. Mountains rose where his thoughts wandered. Rivers flowed where his mind turned. Stars blossomed across the heavens like sparks from a divine fire. Creation had begun. And from Brahma's own being emerged a radiant presence, Saraswati, the embodiment of knowledge, music, language, and the quiet intelligence that binds the universe together. She shone like the first ray of dawn touching a still lake. But as Brahma beheld the beauty of Saraswati, something strange stirred within him. At first, it was only admiration, but admiration slowly turned into attachment, and attachment began to cloud wisdom. Wherever Saraswati moved, Brahma wished to keep her in his sight. When she walked east, he turned his head to follow. When she moved west, he turned again. Soon, 4 heads had formed upon him, each wandering a different direction, so that the goddess could never leave his gaze. Sound familiar? This is not a story about a god. It's a story about what happens to any mind when it gets consumed by attachment and desire. The harder Brahma tried to hold on to Saraswati, the more distorted he became. 4 heads, then 5, a 5th erupting from the crown of his being, watching her even as she fled into the heavens. Creation itself had become deranged by the very thing that had started it. High in the mountains, deep in the stillness of meditation, another presence observed what had unfolded. It was Shiva, the lord of disillusion, the ascetic who sits beyond creation and destruction alike. Shiva opened his eyes, and from Shiva's being emerged a fierce form, Bhairava, dark as the moonless night, blazing with terrible clarity. He wore no crown, no garlands. Around his neck hung skulls, reminder that even the mightiest forms must one day fade. Bhairava walked into Brahma's celestial court. The gods trembled. Brahma looked upon this fierce stranger and demanded, "Who dares enter the court of the Creator without bowing?" Bhairava did not answer. He lifted his hand, and with a motion swift as lightning, he severed Brahma's fifth head. The heavens echoed with the sound of the falling skull. In that moment, Brahma awoke. The fifth head, the head of arrogance, of possessiveness, of the belief that creation itself could be owned, fell into Bhairava's hand like a dried leaf. The remaining four heads bowed in humility. Saraswati returned, her gaze calm once more, and creation continued. Now here is the part most people miss about this story. In Abrahamic theology, sin denotes disobedience to divine command. The moral universe is therefore structured around obedience and violation. In Hindu traditions, this structure is absent. The closest Sanskrit term often translated as sin is pap. It refers to actions that generate negative consequences within the framework of karma. The Brihadaranyaka Upanishad expresses this causal principle succinctly. According as one acts, so does he become. One becomes virtuous by virtuous action, bad by bad action. So to ask, why would a god commit sin, is to imagine the divine as distant from the currents of causation. In Hindu thought, the divine descends into the unfolding drama of the cosmos, participating in its sacred Leela to reveal the map of the human mind. So Brahma is not a god misbehaving. Brahma is the part of you that tries to grip, control, and possess, the part that sprouts more and more desperate eyes when something you love begins to slip away. Bhairava is what happens when that illusion meets the part of reality that will not negotiate. He does not argue with Brahma, he does not counsel him gently. He severs. Because some illusions cannot be reasoned away, they have to be cut. This story also carries one more layer that is rarely discussed. After severing the head, Bhairava himself must wander. Brahma is a Brahmin, and killing a Brahmin, even a Brahmin trapped in illusion, creates karmic consequence. Bhairava had to suffer through Brahmahatya dosha. Even a liberating act has weight. The rules of causation apply to everyone, even the gods. In the Vijnana Bhairava Tantra, the name Bhairava is broken down syllable by syllable. Bha, bhasana, pure illumination, consciousness itself. Ra, Ravana, the burning away of ignorance. Va, Vamana, the outpouring, the expansion of awareness into everything. Bhairava is not merely a frightening deity, he is the moment when consciousness expands by burning away illusion. The skulls, the cremation grounds, the terrifying imagery represent the practitioner's willingness to face the one thing every ego fears most, its own impermanence. Every identity the mind constructs will eventually dissolve. Bhairava simply confronts you with that truth directly, rather than letting you defer it forever. Going back to the Vijnana Bhairava Tantra, it is a structured dialogue between Shiva and his consort Parvati, and instead of an elaborate ritual procedures, it presents 112 brief meditation methods, many based on nothing more than intense, ordinary moments in everyday life. One of those teachings is unlike anything I have ever encountered. It says, when a person experiences sudden fear, an unexpected shock, the feeling of falling, the instant when danger appears, the mind briefly stops its ordinary activity. For a fraction of a second, thoughts disappear, identity pauses, and the future and past vanish. And in that tiny gap, the text says, pure awareness reveals itself. The instructions are these. If the practitioner becomes aware of that silent gap rather than being overwhelmed by the fear, they can glimpse the state called Bhairava. The terrifying moment becomes a doorway to expanded consciousness. Most spiritual systems you have likely encountered tell you to seek stillness, remove disturbance, create conditions for peace, and then practice. The Vijnaya Bhairava says no. Use the disturbance, the moment of intensity, the shock, the fear, because it does for a fraction of a second what decades of meditation are trying to do deliberately. It stops the ordinary mind cold. In that gap, before the mind manages to reassemble its story, before the ego rushes back in to explain what just happened, something else is briefly visible. The tradition calls it Bhairava, the recognition of pure consciousness before it is able to take any particular form. And ladies and gentlemen, you are not ready for this, because modern science completely independently stumbled onto exactly the same discovery. Scientists studying the brain assumed something intuitive. Richer experience must mean more brain activity. If you took a powerful psychedelic substance and your perception of reality becomes more vivid, more intense, more real than ordinary life, surely your brain must be working harder. They ran the scans, and what they found was the complete opposite. Brain activity didn't increase, it actually went down. The more the ordinary filtering activity of the brain was suppressed, the richer and more heightened our experience becomes. Now, there actually is a whole lot of research done on this, but instead I'm going to pick out one very radical one, which are near-death experiences, also called NDEs. Because during an NDE, your brain activity doesn't just go down, it practically goes to zero. Yet survivors of these NDEs reported that during their experience, they would have the most profound and real and vivid experiences that they've ever had before. Not reporting any confusion, but rather that they were returning to something vast and to something that felt like home. And so they tried to bridge these two experiences, and there's a study on DMT, the most potent psychedelic, and near-death experiences. And what they found was these people were describing the exact same experience. So how can we explain this? Because according to all modern scientific standards, the brain and its neural pathways are responsible for consciousness. But there is an incredible idealist philosophy of Sanatana Dharma which offers us a completely different framework, saying that the brain doesn't create consciousness or experience, but rather filters it. The Upanishads uphold that consciousness exists by itself and that the physical world depends on it. There is no objective reality that exists independently of the observer. According to Hindu scriptures, consciousness is not something that comes about merely through the neural connections in the brain, but is a basic characteristic of all reality. Think of it as a radio. A radio appears to produce music, but the music is already there, transmitted as a signal. The radio's job is to select one frequency and block out all the rest. So in this framework, the brain narrows the infinite down into one stream you can call yourself, because without that narrowing, you could not function as an individual. And so when the ordinary filtering mechanism of the brain is disrupted, whether by psychedelics, near-death experience, or a sudden collapse of mental patterns in a pure moment of terror, what emerges is not nothing. What emerges is more, and as the Vijnaya Bhairava called it, Bhairava consciousness. The Upanishads call it Brahman, the NDE researchers call it something that they don't have a clean name for yet. But they are all pointing at the same gap, the same silence beneath the noise. Everything we have covered so far is philosophical. Now let's talk about what you actually do with it. Because the Tantric tradition is not a philosophy to contemplate, it's a technology to use. Bhairava has a seed mantra or bij mantra. In tantric practices, a bij mantra is not a prayer in the conventional sense, it is a sound form of a particular energy. Repetition of the mantra, done with awareness, is understood to attune the practitioner to the quality of consciousness that the deity represents. In Bhairava's case, the primary seed syllable is the following. The mantra works because it gives the scattered mind a single point of focus. So a simple practice for the modern context would be with 3 things. First, stillness, sitting somewhere where you will not be interrupted for 10 minutes. Second, intention. Before you begin, hold clearly in your mind what you are bringing to Bhairava. What illusion are you asking to have cut, or what attachment is strangling you? Which part of the self you have built is already dead, but you are still carrying? Third, the mantra itself. Repeat it quietly or internally, not rushed and not mechanical. With each repetition, let the word actually land. And so I'll leave you with a final thought. You are not simply a human brain having a conscious experience, but consciousness itself temporarily filtered down into one human life, one specific struggle, and one particular moment in history. Your ancestors, thousands of years before the neuroscientists, before the psychedelic researchers, and before the near-death experience studies, already knew this. Aham Brahmasmi.